The question brought to the text is this: is the pattern affirmative? The lead verse is Luke chapter 6, verse 20. It says, "Blessed are the poor, for yours is the kingdom of Elohim." That is not a headline. It is a benediction. The first drawn verse, Psalm 27, verse 2, sets the warfare frame. When the covenant wicked, even my enemies and my foes, came upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. So the word opens in blessing and battle, and the yes runs through both. The deterministic verdict is yes, affirmative. The pattern is a strong anomaly. The confidence stands at 99.6% yes and 0.4% no. The convergence is measured at 7.34 sigma. The anomaly detection E-value and the triple convergence standard are passed. Several independent channels cross threshold together, and the pattern survives correction. This is a strong pattern, not a proof of a date. The ledger has no labeled outcomes yet, so the verdict is a reverent prior, not a certificate. The heaven signs of this day are real. A total solar eclipse darkens the sun. The Perseid meteor shower peaks under a dark sky, and planets gather in the morning hours. The drawn text speaks to this. Enoch chapter 60, verse 23, says the spirit of the rain goes forth from its chamber at its time. Job chapter 38, verse 29, asks, out of whose womb came the ice? And who engendered the frost of the skies? The text knows the heavens move by appointment. But Enoch chapter 1, verse 2, says the vision is not for this generation, but for a remote one which is to come. That is the guardrail. The signs are for perception, not for date setting. Acts chapter 19, verse 23, says that about this fixed time there appeared no small stir about that way. The stir is here, and the text says the stir arrives at the fixed time. The draw also carries its own method. 1 Samuel chapter 23, verse 2, says David inquired by Urim-Thummim of the Lord, saying, "Will I go and attack these Philistines?" 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 22, says dialects are for a sign to them that believe not, but prophesying serves for them that believe. Acts chapter 2, verse 12, says they were amazed and asked, "What does this mean?" The asking is not unbelief. 1 Chronicles chapter 27, verse 23, says David took not the number of them, because the Lord had said he would increase Israel like the stars of the cosmos. Counting is bounded by promise. The instrument serves the inquiry, and it never becomes the answer. The sea and the ark keep the same restraint. Psalm 89, verses 8 and 9, says, "You rule the raging of the sea, when the waves of it arise, you still them." The sea is a place of pressure, but the text says the Lord rules it. Revelation chapter 11, verse 19, says the temple of Elohim was opened in heaven, and the ark of his covenant appeared, with lightnings and voices and thunderings and earthquake and great hail. The ark appears in heaven, not as a weapon in the camp. Recognition is reverence, never leverage. The nations are moving. 1 Chronicles chapter 1, verse 5, names the sons of Japheth: Gomer, Magog, Madai, Jovan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. The table of nations is in the draw. Daniel chapter 11, verse 6, says that in the end of years they will join themselves together. The nations do join. A mutual defense pact signed in Mecca binds Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan. Syria and Russia reorder their Mediterranean ports. Jeremiah chapter 28, verse 14, says a yoke of iron is placed on the neck of all these nations. Jeremiah chapter 32, verse 5, warns that fighting against what the Lord has decreed will not prosper. 1 Samuel chapter 8, verse 15, says a king will take the tenth of your seed and your vineyards. Isaiah chapter 14, verse 16, asks, "Is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms?" The text does not certify one treaty or one war as fulfillment. It supplies the grammar for watching, and the grammar says confederations form, kings exact, and the man who shakes kingdoms is remembered with a question. The inheritance thread speaks with care. Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 28, says you will live in the land that I gave to your forefathers, and you will be my people and I will be your God. Leviticus chapter 25, verse 24, says in every land of your covenant inheritance you will constitute a right of redemption for the land. Joshua chapter 13, verse 24, says Moses gave priestly inheritance to the tribe of Gad. The land is held as a covenant trust, not grasped by force. But the loudest voice is priesthood. Leviticus chapter 9, verse 22, says Aaron lifted up his hand toward the people and blessed them. Psalm 4, verse 5, says slaughter the consecrated sacrifice of covenant faithfulness, and put your covenant trust in the Lord. Psalm 134, verse 2, says lift up your hands in the sanctuary, and bless the Lord. Psalm 24, verse 5, says he will receive the sacred blessing from the Lord. 2 Chronicles chapter 24, verse 16, says the priest was buried in the city of David among the kings, because he had done good toward God and toward his house. Romans chapter 8, verse 27, says the one who searches the hearts knows the mind of the Spirit, because he makes intercession for the saints according to the will of God. Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 18, says he that sounded the trumpet was by me. Revelation chapter 16, verse 7, says I hearkened to the altar of consecration saying, the priest is not absent. The trumpet stands beside the builder. This is the center. The war and the pacts and the signs pass across the screen, but the text keeps returning to the altar. The cautionary verses are not a contradiction. Jeremiah chapter 11, verse 8, says they obeyed not, but walked in the imagination of their bad heart, and the covenant words fall on them. Luke chapter 11, verse 46, says you load burdens on others and will not touch them with one finger. Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 28, asks, where are your gods that you have fashioned yourself? Ephesians chapter 4, verse 27, says neither give occasion to the false accuser. Jude chapter 1, verse 9, says Michael, contending with the devil, did not bring a railing accusation, but said, the Lord adjudge you. The yes is for covenant keepers. The warnings set the key. When signs provoke contention, the archangel's restraint is the model. No railing. The Lord adjudge you. What then is the Father saying? The lead verse says the kingdom belongs to the poor. Psalm 3, verse 8, says salvation belongs to the Lord, and your sacred blessing is upon your people. Psalm 63, verse 7, says because you have been my help, therefore in the shadow of your wings will I overcome. Genesis chapter 12, verse 3, says I will bless them that bless you, and curse him who curses you, and in you shall all families of the entire inhabited earth be blessed. The enemies stumble. The sea stills. The nations join. The heavens keep their chambers. The priesthood rises. The gap is not empty, because the Spirit intercedes and the trumpet stays by the worker. The yes means the Father is speaking, the pattern is real, and the direction is toward engagement, not passivity. It is not a yes that says all is well. It is a yes that says watch, stand in the gap, lift your hands, bless, and trust. The answer is yes. Blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom. Salvation belongs to the Lord. The verdict is firm, and the voice is gentle. Selah. The verses drawn in this altar of reception session were Psalms chapter 27, verse 2, Jeremiah chapter 11, verse 8, 1 Samuel chapter 23, verse 2, Psalms chapter 78, verse 44, Enoch chapter 60, verse 23, Leviticus chapter 9, verse 22. This concludes today's interpretation at the altar of reception.